Greetings, Grade 28 facilitators. Welcome back for Lesson 2, which is actually the third session. We had an introduction, a Lesson 1, and now Lesson 2. And Lesson 2 continues on the theme of Lesson 1 under the Get category. And so in this lesson, we're going to understand how God continues to work through means. And as we go through an opening discussion here, there's an opening quote to look at and to read through. What we're really trying to emphasize is looking at baptism and the Lord's Supper and seeing if these things are tools in our hands or tools that God uses to work upon us. So is it something we have to do, or is it something God is doing to us through these means? Okay, and obviously we'll come to the conclusion, hopefully, from the scriptures, seeing that these are things that God gives us, and He works through these things to do a great work in us so that we can also do a great work in the lives of others. So there's three main texts that we're going to look at in today's lesson. The first one comes from 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 through 14. So this is the story of Naaman, a commander of the army of the king of Syria. And so he has leprosy, and he gets word that there's a prophet in Israel that could maybe speak a word from God and cleanse that leprosy. And so eventually he comes to Elijah, and he comes to Elijah's house, knocks on the door, and Elisha doesn't come up or make any big fanfare of it. He sends somebody out with a message to go wash yourself in the Jordan 7 times. And you'll see that this irritates the king of Naaman, the commander of the army, because you'll see he's really wanting something kind of fancy where Elijah does something fancy over his head that all these people can see it. And he actually walks away pretty irritated, saying, there's these other rivers I could have used. Why would I have to come here? Why didn't he just say that instead of coming here to the Jordan? This is a long way around of him Naaman learning that the prophet speaks the word from God to use the means of the water to wash 7 times and that he would be clean. So one of Naaman's servants says, hey, he said wash and be clean, so maybe you ought to do that. Well, he does, despite being angry and upset, and he washes in the Jordan 7 times, and he comes out clean. Okay, this is a real simple illustration of how God works through means to heal, to forgive, and to do other things in your life and in mine. Okay, so there was nothing really special about the Jordan per se, as much as it was God's word attached to this action of him washing in the Jordan that would work the healing. So faith and trust in the word, in this case, which was also visible through the washing in the water, is the main thing. Okay, so we're just kind of setting that stage for how God works through means and what he does in our life and the things that he works in our life through those means. The next one we're going to come to is the Lord's Supper in Matthew 26 as it's first instituted. And so the question here is, Jesus institutes a new meal smack dab in the middle of what ancient meal? And this is the Passover meal, if you don't know. And what did that ancient meal commemorate? The exodus of God's people from oppression and slavery in Egypt, right? And so the parallel with the Lord's Supper is our exodus now from the oppression of sin and evil and the devil in our lives, so that we are forgiven and freed to now do otherwise, where before salvation we would always choose things contrary to God in most cases, although we could have some civil righteousness in our life, but nothing that we did would be pleasing before God at that time. So here we're just looking at the Lord's Supper as a means by which we get the forgiveness of sins and strength to live differently and to live with our faith as we should. And God pours his love into us in that meal so that we can pour that love into others. And there's some more questions there that you'll go through to see that. And then lastly, Hebrews 10, 19 through 25, you're going to go through this, and we're just going to kind of ask some application questions. Does the Lord's Supper play a role in helping us live out the great words written by the author of Hebrews in chapter 10, verses 19 through 25? And what are two means or tools whereby God delivers the joy of verse 22 from this reading into our lives? So there's a little hint in the parentheses there that says there's 5 to choose from. Okay, there's 5 means of grace as we see it, and as we see it in the scriptures, also articulated in the small called articles of the Book of Confession, or the Book of Concord. Sorry, not Book of Confession, Book of Concord. They are listed there. So we have 2 visible means, which is the Lord's Supper and baptism, visible means of the word and the gospel. And then we have the audible, proclamation of the gospel, absolution spoken in the forgiveness of sins, and then one believer speaking that gospel to another believer, the fellowship of believers there, speaking God's word to one another. Okay? Then there's a last little section here, did you know, simply asking some things of your members in your group, Grade 28 group, whether they know we have a 12:15 service, that we offer communion, and then also Sundays, of course. So knowing that they could go and receive that great gift 2 times a week if they wanted to. And there's also individual confession absolution that we advertise at times and do it in certain windows, but are also always able, Pastor Thompson and I, to do that upon request. Okay? And we're going to probably do something pretty neat with that in Lent also. So keep a heads up for that. Okay? So that's all on lesson 2, and next week we will be transitioning into our first lesson on the grow part, which is growing in the grace and knowledge of God, which is definitely rooted in the Word. Okay, so I hope you have a good meeting and a good session, and that you continue to develop as His disciples. Thank you.